Hey everybody, welcome back to our study through the exile. Today, we're going to talk about the life of Daniel. See, this is where we wanted to start our series, is going through the exile, looking at the different individuals who experienced it firsthand, and how they were able to relate to the Lord in those moments. Because honestly, when you're removed from your current situation and placed in a totally new season of life, it's difficult to readjust and have to figure out how exactly you can learn and grow in your relationship with Jesus. Perhaps this actually is what you guys are going through right now. Some of you, because your life may be so different, you might just find it difficult to even comprehend a relationship with Jesus right now. I know for me, that's been a major difficulty. I'm a typically pretty extroverted person. I don't know if you guys knew that, but when I'm removed from people and I'm around the same people, it's kind of like eating the same meal every day for a month. There's nothing wrong with the food. It hasn't changed, and it's not like it's bad now. It's just, I need variety. And that's not to say that it's anything bad for you to enjoy the same food for a month. Some people really like this time. They might have grown immensely. It could even be that many of you have spent time with the Lord and you've grown tremendously. But I know for me, it's been a major challenge. And it's been a major challenge because I just feel disconnected from people. And I know that that's something I've been having to overcome, is how I grow in my relationship with Jesus when it's just me and Jesus. Because right now, that's a lot of what it is. But that's why we start in the book of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 1, I encourage you, take a minute, pause this video, and read Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. Just take some time and read through that little bit. You can pause it right here. If not, I'll read for us Daniel 1 through 8 really quickly. Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 8 start to illustrate the story for us of Daniel after he's been taken into captivity. This is actually before Nebuchadnezzar has destroyed the entirety of Jerusalem. He's taken in what's called the first wave of the exiles, some 10 years before Nebuchadnezzar actually comes and destroys everything. So if we look at Daniel chapter 1, we start here. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, and he began to besiege it. The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands and some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. The king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of nobility, youths without blemish, good appearance, skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and the wine that he drank, and they were to be educated for 3 years. At the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. The chief of the eunuchs gave them new names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael was Meshach, and Azariah was Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. So as we read through this area of scripture and look at the book of Daniel, the very beginning of the book of Daniel is telling us about these people that are taken out of their home, like we talked about, being ejected from their home, supplanted in a new land, and forced to assimilate to a new culture. They're put under the rule and authority of the Babylonians. But that means a lot of change for Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You see, these four and those like them are now not just forced into a new culture, they're actually going to be educated in that culture. That means they're getting a new education. They've been raised in the king's palace. They've been taught to read and write in Hebrew, and now it's going to be changed to Aramaic, a language that the Persians, the Chaldeans, and other groups of people speak and write in. They're being educated that way. They're being educated in new mythology, new stories of how the world was created and how things came to be. They're shown new gods and how those gods created the world, at least through the eyes of the Babylonians. They're given new clothes so that they begin to appeal to the Babylonians more and look less like exiles from the land of Judah. They're even given new food, new drink, things that are taken from the portion of the king, which are all over the world, brought into his table. These different delicacies are brought, but Daniel refuses to eat of them. And Daniel's not doing this because he believes that that food is poisonous or bad, but he knows that he's called to be holy. And some of the food that's being given likely is going to be food offered to idols. On top of it being offered to idols, it's offered to the king. And if the king, Nebuchadnezzar, believes he is a god, like we'll later see in the book, that food being offered to him is being offered directly to the idol. And Daniel wants no part of it, because he knows that there is only one true God, and that is the God of heaven, Yahweh, the God of Israel, and the God of Judah. And he takes a stand and he says, I will not do this. I will not eat of the king's food. And we'll read that story later, but for now, let's focus on this. They come in and have their lives completely warped and changed. And one of the major elements of that is having their names changed. Did you know Belteshazzar is actually a call to the name Bel, like B-E-L, who was a god of the Babylonians. But Daniel is a name from Hebrew that is about God. That E-L at the end of his name, Daniel, is actually a name derivative of Hebrew talking about God being a judge. But Belteshazzar is changed completely into an all-new identity. Could you imagine having your identity changed? Not just because it gets stolen because you have, credit card numbers on a screen or something, but rather you get your identity completely changed so that people are forced to call you by a different name, and your entire identity and purpose is totally and completely altered. That'd be difficult. But even more so, think about this for a second. For them, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel and the others like them, for them to appeal to holiness, they need a temple. In fact, the Levitical laws even require a temple for most forms of worship. Even today, one of the reasons the Jews are not able to celebrate in proper ways is because they don't have a temple. The temple is a requisite of a lot of worship. But Daniel knows that the Lord is still God everywhere. And even though he may not have a temple, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego may not be able to sit underneath the teaching of the priests, of the Levites in the temple, they know that they have a relationship with the Lord that is capable of moving and shaping them into a person more like himself, even in the Old Testament. And so what I challenge you is, in this new season of life, this new normal, how are you finding time alone with the Lord? Absolutely, this can come from time with Scripture, but how are you finding time to pray? When are you finding time to make sacrifices for the Lord? One of the sacrifices I'm having to make just as a father, I'm having to realize that even though there are opportunities for me to leave the house and go be elsewhere, because this is starting to let up a little, I still need to be at home with my kids. I still need to be a servant to my wife, and I need to be willing to make that sacrifice, even though for me it might be difficult. But how are you making sacrifices? What do you do to serve other people in this area of your life right now? How can you do that? Maybe even if you can't leave your house, maybe you have a loved one who you're worried for, how can you serve them? What can you do that will exemplify Jesus today? Because this is a totally new normal. It's not a circumstance where we get to come and be a part of worship. We don't get to go stand inside of a building and worship and sing and listen to preaching together. This is totally different. This is a circumstance where the Lord is challenging us to grow in a one-on-one relationship with Him. And right now, God has us all to Himself. And so I challenge and I ask you guys, how are you doing that? How is a moment that you are spending time with Jesus? Maybe answer it down in the comments. Kind of let me know. I'd love to hear some info on that. But I'm interested to know, how are you spending time with the Lord? And if you're not, I challenge you to do so.